recording and okay. And hopefully that works out. I do see that somebody has enabled AI meeting notes, and unfortunately, per our policy, we can't have those. But like I said, I am recording this, and we will have training documentation available for folks to review, and we'll have the slides available after our presentations are done. So there'll be lots of material out there to help y'all, while so the meeting notes won't be a make or break. You won't be lost without them. So if you have any questions as we're going through this, feel free to put the questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. At the top of your screen, there should be a little hand button with raise underneath it. You can just click on that. At that time, then you can come off mute. We'll have time at the end for additional questions and discussion as well. So at that time, you can come off mute as well. So the purpose of our call today is to review some of the upcoming data standard changes that will go live in the system October 1st. So you might see some of these changes in the training site if you've been able to log into there, but they won't go live into our production site until October 1st. So before we get into the changes, I'd like to do just a quick overview of what the data standards are, so we know what we're talking about. So the data standards are a set of requirements for HMIS data collection established by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, so HUD, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, and the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, so the VA. They allow for the standardized data collection on individuals and families experiencing homelessness across systems. They provide ways to measure project performance and participate in benchmarking of the national effort to end homelessness. And they are updated approximately every 2 years. So for some of you, this is a routine thing that happens. But if you're a newer HMIS user, this might be new to you. So like I mentioned before, after the presentations, we'll be posting the slides, most likely in the PA HMIS training folder in HMIS. We'll have these posted in the production site, and I can put them in the training site as well. I just want to mention that because this slide has a list of acronyms that could come up in this presentation. And I'm not going to sit here and go through all of them with you, but you will have it for reference material. Although I'm sure most of you know what these acronyms are, I still feel it's helpful just to have something to reference because for some reason we love to have so many of them. I'll point out the APR annual performance report, the CAPER consolidated annual performance and evaluation report. Those are mentioned a few times as we review the data standard changes. CSVs, which are comma separated values, are also mentioned a few times. So you'll see CSVs in like your different exports. So when you do like an APR, CSVs are found in your validation file, for example. And if you aren't sure what an APR or CAPER is as we go through this information or how you can use it, please reach out to me because those are two very important reports that we have. Multiple projects use them, but they can also be good with data quality, which everybody I'm sure loves to hear me talk about. So our first group of changes that we will review are regarding our universal data elements. While we go through the different changes, that are occurring. Once they go live October 1st in our production site, if you notice anything off in the system or if you run into any issues, please don't hesitate to put in a ticket. I don't foresee any issues happening, but you know, it's always good just to remind everybody that the ticket system exists. And that sometimes, you know, when changes are made, things can happen. So if anything looks weird, not working properly, put in a ticket. But again, fingers crossed, I don't foresee anything happening. And your universal data elements are the elements that are collected for all projects pretty much. So that's the universal piece of that. So the first data element that is changing, it is one of the selections for race and ethnicity. So the label that we currently have is Hispanic, Latina /E/O. That is being changed to Hispanic/Latina/O. The updates for that will occur in your client workflows and different reports. So your APR, your CAPER, your Path Annual Report, and your HMIS CSV export. And although I have the acronym slide, if I'm going through this and you're like, Jessica, I have no idea, just let me know and I can, you know, explain what they are. Gender. This is now a retired element. So currently this is on our basic client information screen, the family members form, and the add a family member form. So at this point, we will no longer be collecting this data element. Since this element is being retired, we've been in discussion with the vendor so that this field most likely won't appear in the screens I mentioned. But until that happens, you may see it and it will no longer be mandatory to collect. We will instead have a new data element labeled sex. This is a different element from gender, and information is not mapped between the two data elements. So basically what that means is if the gender field was answered, that won't auto-populate into the sex field. So they're different elements with different answers. And we have a good question. Do we need to go in and make these changes to current clients on 10/1? So we don't have official guidance on that yet, but I would say as you're working with your clients, make the change at that time. I wouldn't necessarily worry about going back to clients who have exited, but if we get guidance that we need to do that, we'll be sure to let you know. But for now, I would say, just your current clients as you're meeting with them, you don't have to necessarily do like a special phone call like, hey, but if you're already talking to them and working with them, you could just update it at that time. So this sex question will appear on the basic client information form, family members form, and the program enrollment form. And this table on the slide, which hopefully everybody can see, shows what funding sources will have this element. There's some different responses for this element, and the allowable responses are female, male, client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, and data not collected. When asking this question to clients, the guidance that we received was to approach this question like, what is the client's sex at birth? So you'll see the sex data element as visible and available, like I said, on the client intake form and the HMIS family member forms. but it won't be required at those points. They're not required on those two particular forms because there's not a direct tie to a program and funding source to make that element required. You'll see the sex data element as visible and conditionally required on the project enrollment form. So at this step of the HMIS intake, you would have selected the program to enroll the client and family into, and that project type and funding source will be used to determine if the element is just visible and available or required. So if it's required, you'll see the red asterisk by the header, and you'll know that it's mandatory to enter. So this is just an example of what the field looks like on the basic client information screen. This is an example of the sex field on the family member screen. And this is an example of the sex field on the project enrollment screen. And in this example, you can see that this is mandatory. Again, it has those little red asterisks at the top. So that's what it will look like. Translation assistance needed. So the translation assistance needed step of the HMIS intake will be disabled as this is now also retired. All of the historical data will remain in HMIS. So if for any reason you would need to view that historical data, just reach out to your HMIS admin, and we can, provide you with that information. Or if, you would need to make a change to that historical data, we could make the change for you. So just reach out to us and let us know. So we just took a look at the universal data elements. Are there any other questions about those so far? Okay, and we'll move on to the program specific data elements. So the first one is for our VA projects, and it is looking at specific disabling conditions. So the fiscal year 26 data dictionary was updated on October 11th, 2025 to remove the requirement for any VA funded projects to collect the following: physical disability, developmental disability, chronic health condition, HIV/AIDS, mental health disorder, and substance use disorder. So those items are found on your barrier screen. And at this point, VA funded projects are no longer required to collect those. Financial assistance, this is for SSVF. HUD has added an additional field to the services screen called the information date, and you can kind of see on that picture, hopefully, it's underneath financial assistance start date and financial assistance end date, and the blue box there is information date. This field will appear when an SSVF financial assistance service type is selected, and the date in there will default to the financial assistance start date. So most likely those dates will be the same. And based on how services are set up in the system, you may see this field appear even if you aren't operating an SSVF project. So if you do see that, you can leave it as defaulted. So yeah, so the requirement for this is for VA funded projects, just for the question in the chat, but if the service that is selected is a financial assistance service that can be used by SSVF projects, then this still might show up for you. So if it does, just leave it as defaulted. And that's something, that we'll look into, but it's just for now, it's how the services are set up on the back end. So don't be surprised if you see this and you're not a SSVF project. You know, but don't worry about it. Because it's not going to impact anything as far as like your data or reporting or anything like that. So hopefully that answered the question in the chat there. It's a little long-winded, but it's really just required for SSVF. However, it still might show up for other projects, depending on what service you select. Target criteria. So 2 questions of the homeless prevention targeting criteria have wording changes. So previous language was that a household size of 5 or more requiring at least 3 bedrooms due to age and gender mix has been updated to household size of 5 or more requiring at least 3 bedrooms due to household composition. So it's changing that age and gender mix label. Household includes 1 or more members of an overrepresented population in the homelessness system when compared to the general population has changed to households which may include 1 or more members meeting other criteria for targeting prevention determined by the CoC. And this is kind of a small picture, but this just shows you what those updated questions look like in that HP target criteria screen. Mental health consultation. This has been added to the universal data assessment for VA funded projects to be collected at the start for heads of households and veterans. So this is a new element. It has 4 allowable responses, and they are mental health consultation completed, mental health consultation being coordinated, arranged with a VA provider, mental health consultation being coordinated, arranged with other provider, or offered declined. And these are the projects that will collect the mental health consultation information. So rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention SSVF projects and VA grant per diem projects that have the project type of case management / housing retention. And here's an example of what that looks like in the workflow. So we have household income as a percentage of AMI, an HP screening score field, VAMC station number, and then the mental health consultation question with the drop down. Sexual orientation. So the sexual orientation question or data element is now retired. Currently for RI funded projects, the question will show up but not be required. RI is runaway homeless youth. I don't believe we currently have any RI funded projects in our CoC, but this question is also included in our CoC funded PSH projects, so our continuum of care permanent supportive housing projects. So we're in discussion with the vendor to essentially hide this field from our CoC PSH project workflow since it's no longer required. But in the meantime, you might see it and it just won't be mandatory. There's also family critical issues. HUD updated the status drop-down portion of the critical issue responses on the runaway homeless youth entry assessment to include options client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, and data not collected. To my knowledge, this isn't something that impacts our YHDP projects, but if I hear anything differently, I'll let everybody know because RI and YHDP often collect similar information. And this is just an example of what that question looks like. So it's on the entry assessment screen. which holds the sexual orientation question. So some of you may be familiar with what the screen looks like. Then it shows the critical issues underneath, and then the updated drop down for the status options there. Housing move-in date. Housing move-in date is updated now to be required for services-only projects when funded by a VA grant per diem, case management, housing retention funding source. So we do have a few of those projects in our CoC. So that's one change, that this is now required for them. The date of engagement, the 2026 Data Dictionary made a clarification that the date of engagement is also necessary for street outreach projects that are funded by HUD, CoC, YHDP to collect. Currently now, most of our street outreach projects collect this element. So this is just clarification about the specific projects funded by YHDP for street outreach. Okay, so thanks for hanging with me so far. We'll take a look at some of the reporting changes. I would say there's nothing too big in these changes that impact how we're collecting data or how things are being reported, other than the change between gender and sex. But we'll just go on through what those changes are so you're aware. And as always, if you have questions, let me know. Okay, so our HUD data quality report. The row for gender in the data quality report has been removed to align with the retiring of that data element. The row for gender will be removed from the viewer and drill down in the HUD data quality report and client track. And additionally, data quality 7 question, inactive records, street outreach, and emergency shelter has updated which project type should be considered for each row. So they removed project type emergency shelter from active and active row 2, and they added project type services only if it's path funded to active and active row 2. And the CoC, APR, and ESG CAPER, so those funding sources, like the APR is used for your CoC funded projects, the CAPER is used for your ESG funded projects, but either can just be used for general data quality as well, no matter what your funding source is, although I encourage path providers to use the path annual report for their data quality items. So our APR and CAPER also has a few changes to align with the data quality updates. The row for gender, personal identifiable information has been retired, to align with the retiring of gender from the data dictionary. And similar to the last slide, the inactive record, street outreach, and emergency shelter has updated which project type should be considered for each row. So emergency shelter was removed, and services only if path funded was added for that specific data quality question. And this just lists the questions that reference gender that have all been retired. So when you are looking at your data quality items for the APR or CAPER, once all of this information goes live, you'll see that the gender questions or the questions referencing gender, those will be gone. And this is a list of questions that will be updated with the new label for Hispanic, Latina, Latino. So that's just a list of those questions. and question 24D will be retired in the 26th version of the APR CAPER to align with the update to retire the translation assistance needed. So, basically the elements that are retired that we're not mandated to collect are being removed from this reporting. It's just a quick way to sum that up. There will be some new questions to capture the sex information. So question 24A is a new question that will be, question 24E will be a new question that will be in the APR and CAPER. Universe for this new question is active clients in the report range across all project types. So if the client does not have a value entered for sex, the APR or CAPER will include that client in the data not collected row for that question. For PATH, the PATH annual report was updated. Question 26A to remove gender-related questions. A new question was added, question 26I, to capture the sex-related information, and the label for Hispanic, etc., was updated in question 26C. So those updates will be made in the formatted report, the PATH annual CSV export, the drill down, and the detail validation files. The HMIS CSV export, we have pointed out just like a few of the specific CSV files. This first one is the client CSV. This is being updated to remove the columns relating to gender, adding in a new column for the new sex data element, relabeling the column header for Hispanic, Latina, Latino to align with the data dictionary, and ensuring that all veteran-related elements are null for non-veterans. The enrollment CSV is being updated to remove columns related to sexual orientation and translation assistance needed, since those are retired. Adding in a new column for the new mental health consultation element, and ensuring that the updated values for R13 can accept the expanded list values of client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, and data not collected. And then the services export. The services is being updated to add additional logic for the date provided field when the record is a SSVF financial assistance service type. So those are the data standard changes this go around. We are still waiting on the final approved HMIS data standards manual for this for 2026. When we do receive that, we'll go through it, and if there's any additional information that would be helpful to you all, or if there's anything that's changed, which I don't foresee that, but we'll definitely reach out and let you know, especially if there's more information that you might want about a specific data element. So any questions, thoughts, concerns? I can stop recording in case some people don't want to talk when it's recording.